Today, the NDP leader has a chance to prove that he didn't sell out Canadian workers for his own pension. Now, he famously promised Canadians that he ripped up his coalition with the Liberals, saying they, quote, were too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people. Now, Conservatives agree, and Canadians want a carbon tax election. So, will the Prime Minister allow the NDP leader to vote for his own words, or did the PM whip the NDP vote to block a carbon tax election?
Everyone's standing up, and so is Pierre. Pierre's looking over at the block going, stand up.
I'm afraid that question doesn't, again, meet the relevance of the administration of government. I do see the government House leader rising to answer. Colleagues, a couple of things. One, let's make sure that when someone has the floor, that no one else is taking the floor. And B, colleagues, I would hate for us to repeat what had gone on Friday. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you mentioned, there was actually no question for the government there, but if the member opposite wants to talk about pensions, he could talk about the pension of the leader of the opposition, who, because he's been here for 2 decades, is estimated at being about $2 million, Mr. Speaker. And if he wants to talk about muzzling of members of parliament, he should probably pose the question to the leader of his own party, who doesn't like MPs that don't ask the questions that he wants them to ask. In fact, we see all of them around the outskirts of the Conservative area in this House of Commons.
If Pierre fixes Canada, give him a bigger pension. Give him a $5 million pension.
Grenville, Thousand Islands, and Rideau Lakes.
Well, it looks like this Prime Minister has lost control of everything except his control over the NDP. Now, according to the NDP leader's own words, quote, "You're never going to count on us if you're going to take away the rights of the workers. Never." Now, we've seen that this Prime Minister has done just that, ordering binding arbitration. But the question is, what has this Prime Minister promised to the NDP in exchange for their support for his failing government and his failed carbon tax?
Yeah. And we have an opportunity to change that today.
Again,
you got mail.
That is not relevant to the administration of government or about the... And the chair will have something to say about this at the end of question period. But I do see that the Honourable Minister was rising on his feet. I don't know if he wants to continue to respond. I see no minister rising. The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, every time that there's a ruling about the government on this issue, there's an absolutely material question, which is the Liberal or the NDP say one thing over and over again, and then come in and support the Liberals. So asking what the Liberals have promised the NDP in favor of their support after time and time again saying all of these things, they keep supporting the government. So what has the government promised the NDP to avoid a carbon tax election?
Yeah. So Fergus is going to try and delay the vote of non-confidence to say that the Conservative question was unfair, and now he muted the mic. Wow, there's more eyeballs watching today than any other day, and this was the same thing with the previous 2 votes of non-confidence. And this guy has the audacity to go
the end of question
and be a dictator.
Perhaps I wish I could have done it earlier, but I see that the Honourable Minister is rising on her feet to answer. The Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, in response to that member's question that, as I think we all know, doesn't actually have to do with government business, but the member opposite, and in fact most of the Conservative caucus, know a thing or two about saying one thing and doing the opposite. They've been talking about cutting taxes, but at the first opportunity to cut taxes for Canadians, they say no, Mr. Speaker. They talk about, standing up on behalf of their constituents, but when they try to do that, the leader of the opposition takes away their ability to pose questions in this place. Mr. Speaker, if they don't repeat the slogans ad nauseum of the leader of the opposition, they're simply not allowed to speak. They're pretty good at saying one thing and doing another. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Wow, this is messed up.
Nose Hill.
To be very clear, Speaker. The leader of the NDP has gotten up and railed against the Liberals for the GST measures, against workers, every possible thing. The NDP has said the government is incompetent. They said they can't vote for him. Yet every time there's a confidence motion, the NDP stand up and do what? They vote for the government. So it is the business of this place. How much is it costing Canadians? What has this administration promised the NDP to get them to vote against their leader's own words?
Yeah. There's something seriously wrong with the House Speaker. He is abusing his power today of all days.
Once again, the Honourable Government House Leader is rising to her feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the honourable member knows something about railing against a leader, but one question that she might want to ask the leader of her party is why he won't get a security clearance. I believe last week at...
What did she just say? Railing against a leader?
Leadership contestant about alleged interference by India in the Conservative leadership race, but the leader of the opposition refuses to get a security clearance to actually learn about what happened. Mr. Speaker, he should put the security interests of Canadians ahead of his own personal interests. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th of September, all Canadians witnessed the leader of the NDP ripping up the agreement with this Liberal government. He was really convincing at the time. He said the Liberals are too weak, too selfish and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for the people. That was on the 4th of September. But today, the 9th of December, will the leader of the NDP allow his members to vote for themselves against him? And if they vote following the party line, how much will this cost to Canadians? Once again, I would like to encourage all members to refrain from speaking when they're not recognised in the House of Commons. Once again, we are in a situation where the speakership is not in the most enviable position, because the question doesn't have to do with government, the government and its operations, but the Honourable Minister is rising. Well, the question is not relevant, Mr. Speaker, but one relevant question is why this Honourable Member can't speak for himself and speak for his constituents. His Conservative leader claims that affordable housing that are built in his riding and in other Conservative ridings simply don't exist. That's a bit odd. He says that housing projects don't exist, where there are hundreds of affordable housing units that are currently being built and that are built in Conservative ridings.
Hundreds, eh?
Once again, before the Honourable Member stands to take the floor, I would like
Pierre's on his phone. I think he's watching the stream. Everybody say hi, Pierre, in the chat. Everybody say hi, Pierre.
Well, my question was very simple. How much will it cost Canadians? The minister doesn't know how to count, but the minister loves to spend. So the problem is the NDP added another layer to this. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberal government will always give in to corporate greed and will always intervene to ensure that unions have no power. That's our motion word for what, Mr. Speaker? So what does the Prime Minister think of a leader who might vote against him? This Prime Minister, who has never respected his word for deficits when he announced to Canadians that there would be a budgetary balance. The Honourable Minister for Public Services and Procurement. I know how to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, Mr. Speaker. That's the number of affordable housing units that were built under the Conservative leader when he was Minister for Housing. 8,000 are being built right now just in Quebec, thanks to the $2 billion agreement between the federal government and the government of Quebec. And hundreds of these housing units will be in Conservative ridings. There are 50,000 that we have built throughout the country over the last few years. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. Mr. Speaker,
is he wearing a...
go for the
what the hell is that pin? Is it an Italian pin, a Palestinian pin?
CBSA Assessment and Revenue Management application, or CARM. 22 breakdowns in 1 month for an application that took 14 years to develop, and that cost taxpayers $556 million. $500 million with just a 50% cost overrun, not to mention the fact that the agency hid important documents from parliamentarians. Today, the Committee for Trade voted unanimously to ask the Auditor General to investigate this latest Liberal fiasco. Will the government support our request for an inquiry? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows full well that the government does not give instructions to the Auditor General, and we respect the free will of committees to study what they want and to invite people, such as the Auditor General, to study important files for Canadians. We believe that the CALM system replaced one that was old. It was 36 years old. And we understand the private sector's concerns, and I have full trust that we will rectify this very rapidly. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. There's a real cost to the agency's fiasco with the CALM. There's one for taxpayers, $556 million, but there's also one for entrepreneurs. Their imports are paralysed at the border. They're suffering billing errors, they're being double paid for direct debits, and there are in-terminal delays for them. They have absolutely no customer service when the CALM crashes. And it takes weeks for the agency to correct its mistakes. What is the government doing today to stop making businesses pay for its fiasco? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we, of course, share the concerns of our colleague. We will support Canadian businesses to make sure that they pay the right amount in an efficient way. That was the objective of modernizing this technology. That started in 2010. So it's not just one government, it's two governments that decided to improve a system to make it easier to access, but also make customs easier to navigate. We will correct the errors. The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagotte. The CALM application fiasco is not a first for the CBSA. The agency was also behind ArriveCan. Let's not forget the application that was supposed to cost $80,000, but that ended up costing $60 million. Clearly, there's a fundamental problem at the agency when it comes to transparency, monitoring of spending, and cost overruns. The Bloc Québécois and the Trade Committee have asked the Auditor General to investigate. The government cannot afford to wait for another fiasco before taking action. Will it put the agency under direct supervision? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we have discussed here in the House a number of times about how important the work of the CBSA is, be it protecting our country, be it dealing with immigration cases, be it stopping the entrance of drugs like fentanyl. So the CBSA every single day does excellent work for our country. We fully trust their work. We will invest even more to support their important work, and that is exactly what we will do.